You guys really sent us on a trip to the future with this one. We're diving into Global Trends 2025, a report straight from the U.S. National Intelligence Council.
It's really fascinating.
And let me tell you, it's a real eye-opener.
You know what I find so interesting about this report? It's not just like fortune telling. It's a serious attempt by intelligence analysts to actually understand what's going to shape the world in the decades to come.
That's crazy. So what's the mission for this deep dive? What are we trying to find out? Well, first off, we're extracting the biggest takeaways from this report, the stuff that you absolutely need to know. We'll uncover the surprising details, the aha moments, and really get into what this all means for you, for me.
Absolutely.
For everybody, right?
For us. This report paints a picture of a world undergoing a dramatic transformation.
Okay.
The global power structure, as we know it, is shifting rapidly, with new players,
Like who?
like China and India, taking center stage.
It's like watching those tectonic plates of geopolitics. The report actually predicts that by 2025, China is going to be the world's second largest economy and the leading military power.
And the shift isn't just about economics, it's about influence. Who sets the global agenda?
Right.
Who writes the rules of the game? These are the questions that will define the 21st century.
You know, one of the most intriguing things I've seen in this report is this whole state capitalism thing that's driving the growth of these emerging powers. It's not quite free market capitalism like we're used to in the West.
Exactly. It's a hybrid model, a blend of government control and market forces. Think about China, for example. They've used state-owned enterprises to fuel growth, and then they've got these industrial policies to guide development.
So it's like the government is kind of like a gardener, carefully cultivating certain industries,
Yes,
directing resources where they think they should go.
that's a great analogy.
But the question is, can this model coexist with like democratic values?
Right.
Or does it kind of inevitably lead to a more authoritarian system?
It's a debate that's playing out right now on the global stage.
Then there's the demographic piece of all this, right?
Yeah.
Something we kind of overlook sometimes, but the report really highlights it.
It does. It highlights it as a major force shaping the future.
Okay. What are we talking about specifically?
We're talking aging populations in the developed world, persistent youth bulges in unstable regions, and rapid urbanization.
So these aren't just like numbers on a page, right?
No, maybe.
These have real-world effects.
Absolutely. Real-world consequences.
For example, take the aging populations.
Right.
By 2025, there'll be more people over 65 than under 5 years old globally.
Think about that.
It's wild.
What does that mean for healthcare systems, for Social Security, for everything?
It's like the whole demographic pyramid flipped on its head, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the coin, you've got these massive youth populations in places that are struggling with poverty and instability.
Right.
And the report suggests that this could lead to increased migration, social unrest, maybe even conflict.
Absolutely. These demographic pressures are like a tinderbox,
Oh, wow.
waiting to ignite.
And then, of course, we got to talk about water, essential for life, becoming more and more scarce.
Yeah.
And the report doesn't sugarcoat it. It paints a really stark picture of what we can expect by 2025.
The report's maps, they literally show a world where water scarcity is a huge problem,
Yeah,
particularly in Africa and Asia. And this has implications for everything,
everything.
from food production
Wow.
to political stability.
The report even uses the term water wars,
It does.
suggesting that conflicts could erupt over this.
Over access, this essential resource.
It's a chilling thought, but it shows just how crucial water security is going to be in the years to come.
And it's not just water. Think about energy. Think about food,
Right.
other vital resources.
Yeah.
As populations grow and demand increases, these are going to be under increasing strain.
Absolutely.
And this competition for resources could easily become
Source of conflict.
a source of tension between nations.
So we're looking at a future where the world order is changing, demographic pressures are building, resource scarcity is a huge concern.
Yes.
It's a lot to take in, but the report goes even deeper, gets into the future of terrorism.
What's interesting here is that the report doesn't simply say it's going to get worse or it's going to get better. It's more nuanced. It argues that while groups like Al-Qaeda might decline,
Right.
the root causes of terrorism,
Yeah.
those are likely to stick around.
So even if we see a decline in traditional terrorist organizations, we're still going to be dealing with the reasons why people turn to extremism in the first place.
Exactly.
Poverty, inequality,
Weak states.
weak states, yeah.
Yeah,
These are the breeding grounds for radicalization.
precisely.
And we can't forget about technology either.
Absolutely.
The tools terrorists are using are getting more sophisticated,
More dangerous.
more dangerous. We're not just talking about bombs and guns anymore. The report highlights bioterrorism, for instance.
It's a frightening thought with the advances in biotechnology.
Right.
The things you need to make a really dangerous pathogen are becoming easier to get.
Wow.
The potential for a devastating attack is very real.
It's sobering to think about. We can't let our guard down. We got to adapt our strategies to deal with this changing threat.
And that's where the report scenarios come in.
Okay.
They're not real, but they're plausible narratives that explore how different trends could actually play out depending on what choices we make and what happens in the world.
They're like, what, glimpses into alternate realities? Each one highlights different things that are happening and how they could turn out. There's one called A World Without the West. It imagines a future where new powers, like China and India, are calling the shots.
Another scenario is October Surprise. It looks at the effects of climate change hitting harder and faster than we expect.
Okay,
It's not a pretty picture.
I bet not.
We're talking a world ravaged by extreme weather, mass migrations, and not enough resources.
That's scary.
And then there's BRICS Bust Up.
Okay.
This one explores what happens if China and India, two rising giants, clash.
They're kind of rivals, right?
Yeah, vying for control in the region.
It's a reminder that just because new powers are rising doesn't mean the world is automatically going to be more peaceful. It could just lead to new, maybe even more dangerous rivalries.
Politics is not always local. In this one, it's the non-state actors, like NGOs and social movements,
Oh, interesting.
that are surprisingly powerful, shaping global issues like climate change.
So a world where the traditional players are kind of sidelined.
Exactly. And where these new voices are stepping up to challenge things.
So these scenarios, they're not predictions, but they make you think, right?
They do. They're thought experiments.
Yeah,
They show us the range of what's possible and what the consequences of our actions could be.
that's so true. They remind us that we're not just along for the ride.
No.
We actually have a say in what the future looks like.
Speaking of shaping the future, the report points to two factors that often get overlooked but will be super important: women and higher education.
It's interesting that the report emphasizes those two, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't always hear about them in these discussions about global power and stuff.
It argues that empowering women and investing in higher education aren't just the right thing to do, they're strategic imperatives if you want to build a better world.
You need to invest in people and give them access to education.
It sees the economic and political empowerment of women as essential for a more just and prosperous world.
Right.
It recognizes their role in driving growth, making change happen, and promoting stability.
It's about unleashing the potential of half the world's population, right?
It is. And about making sure knowledge and skills are the most valuable assets in the future.
And that's where higher education comes in.
Absolutely.
We need to develop those skills and foster innovation.
The report stresses how important it is to invest in what they call human capital. The knowledge, the creativity, the adaptability that'll determine how competitive a nation is in the global economy.
So it's not just about individual nations.
It's not.
It's about the whole world, right?
Exactly.
Working together, sharing knowledge, and building a better future.
Exactly. And it recognizes that women will play an increasingly important role in all of this.
Okay, so we've got this shifting global landscape.
Yeah.
Demographic changes that are going to impact everything.
Right.
And the need to invest in people, in education, in women.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to think about, but it's exciting too.
It is. It's a world full of potential.
It is.
Yeah.
But what about the U.S.? Where do we fit into all of this?
It's not just about individual nations, though. The report also looks at what this power shift means for the global institutions
I see.
that have kind of,
Been running things?
governed the world
Yeah,
for decades.
for sure.
Think about it. The UN,
Uh-huh.
the World Bank, the IMF.
Okay, yeah.
Are they ready for this?
It sounds kind of like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, right?
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, these institutions were designed, world dominated by
the West. Now we're seeing all these new players
Yes.
who want a say
They want in on the action.
in how things are run.
And the report says that these institutions are going to face some serious challenges.
In adapting.
In adapting.
Yeah, makes sense. Can they even accommodate these new powers?
Right.
Can they handle these new global issues like climate change?
The cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity, right.
Yes.
Can they even get the resources they need to function?
That's a real question.
It seems like it just lead to gridlock and inaction.
It could.
And if they can't adapt, then what?
The report paints a pretty, I don't know,
Yeah.
a sobering picture of what they call a governance gap.
A governance gap. What's that?
It's a situation
Okay.
where no single actor or group
Mm-hmm.
has the authority or the capacity to manage global challenges effectively.
So basically the old rules are broken, but we haven't figured out the new ones yet.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a little scary, to be honest.
It is. It presents some real challenges.
It's within this environment, right? This
Yeah.
crazy changing world that we have to deal with some of the most pressing threats. And if we're going to counter them effectively, we can't forget about climate change either.
No, absolutely not.
The report's very clear. Climate change,
It's a threat multiplier.
a threat multiplier, huh? What's that mean?
It means it takes existing tensions and just makes them worse. And it
Okay.
creates new challenges for governments and societies
Right.
all around the world.
Climate change is already having a huge impact. Extreme weather events,
Rising sea level.
rising sea levels, yeah.
And it's disrupting ecosystems.
And the report says these impacts are only going to get worse. We're talking about mass migrations.
It's just this whole cascade of problems that could easily fuel conflict and unrest.
It sounds pretty bleak.
It's a challenging picture.
But does the report offer any hope?
It does.
Okay.
It points to some things.
Like what?
New technologies that could help mitigate some of these challenges. And it emphasizes the need for international cooperation.
To find solutions.
For example, the report talks about potential breakthroughs
Okay.
in renewable energy, water purification, and climate change mitigation.
Right.
But to really make those breakthroughs happen, it's going to take a lot of investment.
For sure.
At the end of the day, this report is a call to action. And the choices we make today will have a huge impact on us, our children,
Right.
and on generations to come.
Really gets you thinking about where the U.S. fits into all this.
Right.
I mean, we've been the dominant global power for decades, but this report is suggesting that that's going to change.
The report acknowledges that, yeah. America's influence is probably going to decline as we move towards a world where power is more distributed.
A multipolar world.
Exactly, a multipolar world.
So it's not that America's going to just disappear, right?
No, not at all.
It's more like we're going to have to learn to share the stage.
Yeah, to collaborate with other powerful nations.
It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
The report highlights that the U.S. will need more pragmatic and flexible foreign policy,
Okay.
one that's really focused on building alliances and partnerships.
And finding common ground.
Exactly.
Because it's a much more complicated world out there.
A much more complex geopolitical landscape.
It sounds like a big shift from what we've seen in the past.
It is.
I mean, that whole go it alone approach.
Yeah, it's a different approach for sure. The report suggests that America will need to get better at working within multilateral frameworks.
Like with the UN and things like that.
Exactly, and finding ways to cooperate.
Even with countries we don't always see eye to eye with.
Even with rivals. And accepting that the U.S. can't always call all the shots.
That's going to be tough for some people to swallow.
It will. It will be a change.
One of the biggest relationships, of course, is with China.
Right.
And things are already pretty tense there, right?
Right. The report doesn't shy away from that, no.
So what does it say?
It says that the competition between the U.S. and China will intensify.
Okay.
And it points out how easy it would be for misunderstandings and miscalculation to lead to conflict.
We're in this high-stakes game of chess. Every move matters.
Every move has to be carefully thought out.
To avoid making things worse.
Exactly.
The report actually uses the term security dilemma to describe this situation.
It's this scenario where one country tries to protect itself, but the other country sees it as a threat. So it leads to this spiral of escalation.
And mistrust. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
In a way, yeah. Each side is making the other feel less secure, which can lead to an arms race or even conflict.
That's why the report stresses the importance of, talking to each other.
Of clear communication, yeah.
Building trust. And finding ways to actually work together on issues we both care about.
Exactly. Finding common ground.
So even though there's this rivalry,
Yeah.
there are still places where the U.S. and China could cooperate, right?
Absolutely.
Like on climate change,
The report makes the case that this kind of collaboration
on the big issues.
on these transnational challenges,
Yeah.
it's not just possible, it's absolutely crucial.
For both countries.
And for the world as a whole. Even when countries are competing with each other,
There can still be some common goals.
shared interests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the U.S. and China, right? The report looks at how this shift in power impacts other regions too.
It does, from Europe to the Middle East to Latin America.
It really shows you how connected the world is.
Exactly.
What happens in one place
Yeah.
really does affect everything else.
It creates ripple effects.
The report highlights some potential trouble spots, like in the Middle East.
The Middle East,
The U.S. is reducing its military presence there, and that could create a vacuum,
a vacuum that other countries
like Russia, China, or Iran.
could try to fill.
And then in Europe,
Yeah,
they've got their own set of challenges.
they do.
Aging population, economic problems, the threat of terrorism.
And Latin America, they could see political and social upheaval as they deal with things like
Inequality,
inequality, corruption,
climate change.
the effects of climate change. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So this report,
It is.
it's not just trying to predict what's going to happen. It's about really understanding how all these forces interact.
In shaping the world.
Exactly. And it's giving us the knowledge we need to, like, navigate this uncertain future.
Exactly. It's a document that anyone who wants to understand what's coming next should read.
It's a good reminder that we're not just watching history unfold, we're actually shaping it.
So to our listeners, we urge you, stay informed
Stay engaged.
and don't be afraid to challenge assumptions.
The world of 2025 and beyond is being shaped right now.
It is.
And the choices we make, all of us, will determine what that world looks like.
It's in our hands.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the future. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.